Welcome to Make a Difference with Phil Martelli. I am Jared Phillips, and the college basketball season, regular season, is winding down to a close. That means a lot of regular season champs are going to be crowned here in the next week or so. And I know everybody always looks to the NCAA tournament, the brackets and everything. But you and I were talking, you can't diminish the value of these teams that can get through a conference gauntlet like that.
Really great point by you. And you think about it now, they're playing, used to be 16 games. Now it's 18 games, 20 games. Regular season champions should never be ignored, should never be relegated to like, oh, well. So our experience with the A10, we won 5 regular season championships in a row. And you know what the A10 gave us? Leather jackets, really nice leather jackets. Now, you always wanted that postseason ring and you wanted those nets. But when I think back, the way the A10 presented themselves to those regular season champions was extraordinary. So now I have to turn it around because you're a fan, whether you're a fan of Temple or a fan of Bryant or whatever. Here's the question. As a fan, would you rather win a regular season title and 0 postseason games, or would you prefer a postseason win over an A10 title or an American East title or a Big East title or ACC title? Where would you go with that?
This is a tricky one. You posed this to me earlier, and I don't know if I still have like a rock solid answer, because all I can think of is just how ruthless opposing fan bases can be. And it's like, you win the regular season title, but you got nothing to show for it in the postseason. You're gonna get, ridiculed. But vice versa, like, if you don't have anything to begin with, like that one postseason win feels like it. I don't know. It transcends a little bit just because that value there. I mean, if you have NCAA tournament success, you can just always hang your hat on that. And like, I love where you're coming from the regular season title, but I think from a fan standpoint, it's all about postseason wins. As vital, I mean, it says so much more about a team for their season long success to come away with a regular season title. You won your conference, like you went through the gauntlet, you faced everybody, and you came out on top. That says more about your program, truly, at the end of the day, than just, hey, we got lucky on a Thursday afternoon in the northwest part of the country because we got a favorable matchup and favorable time, right?
And you've won on the road. When you think about it, postseason is going to be a neutral site. So you've won on the road. And I just think it's a fascinating conversation. And it may well be foreshadowing. It may be a question to ask our guests when we go to this extraordinary guest segment today.
Oh, yeah. We
could ask that question. So here you go. The pressure that is on a one bid league as opposed to a Duke. Let's say we're living it. So the pressure that's on Bryant over the pressure that's on Duke is different. Duke is gearing up to try to play in San Antonio. Bryant is gearing up and driving to have their name called in just a couple of weeks. What I've noticed this year, and maybe more than ever, what I've noticed this year is that our teams are celebrating regular season championships. Teams are cutting down nets. I saw it at Towson. I saw it at Omaha. There was another place where I saw them celebrate that, and good for them, because championships are for life. They never leave you. We've said that before on our podcast, that championships are for life, and you can always address each other as, you don't have to say regular season, but remember, we won a championship together. We cut down the nets once for a regular season championship, but it was the extraordinary circumstance of being 27-0. And the decision was made when I passed it along to Don DeJulia, and he passed it along to Father Lannon, was, you're never going to see this again. 27-0 is an undefeated regular season accomplishment. I didn't know at the time, the NCAA tournament for the regular season also counts your postseason, A10. So the A10, which we didn't win, would have indicated, yes, you are like UNLV that went undefeated. We cut down the nets that night because of that extraordinary feat. And again, there's also other regular seasons that have come to an end with conference tournaments, and that we have many, many men's and women's teams in our area who are celebrating selection to the Division III tournament. Newman College, which is not far from here, Delaware Valley, where the terrific AD Dave Duda, his team won the men's championship. I know that Franklin and Marshall, where I went early in the year and spoke to their team, I'm not saying that's the reason, but they won. Gettysburg won. York won. 5 teams from New Jersey in the Division III men's tournament. So basketball is alive and well, as we well know, in the Delaware Valley. But the idea, regular season champions, congratulations. And isn't it ironic that the championship theme from last week's podcast, Chris Roundtree and Andre Noble winning the public league, Chris, Father Judge team winning the Catholic League, that's drawn some of our biggest numbers, if I'm correct.
You are correct, because people love to hear from a winner.
That's it. So let's keep that going. All those teams out there, most especially those Bryant Bulldogs.
Oh, yeah. We'll be keeping an eye on them. That is for certain. We, of course, have to get to the Martelli Minute and then introduce our terrific guest this week.
So Status Solutions Network is committed to making a difference by providing Alicia Law-compliant safety technology to schools through a grant of use, ensuring that financial barriers never stand between students and proper safety. Each community has the power to create real change. Each community has the power to make a difference in our schools. Learn more about school safety at statussolutions.com. And again, we can't thank them enough. Statussolutions.com. The Martelli Minute. Phil_Martelli every morning, Instagram. And I've been saying 6:30. I've noticed that it's been a little bit, as the season has gotten longer, it's now closer to 7:30. But we have to continue to provide what we hope are pearls of wisdom. Ready? Spend your time as you spend your money wisely. Don't be all over the place. Your time and your money are your valuable asset. Spend them wisely. In times of stress, allow yourself a deep breath. For whatever is happening and causing you stress, it will pass. So we all think in that immediate moment, this is it. This is the be all and end all. Take a breath, relax, let the stress pass, and whatever is causing this anxiety will also pass. Winners separate themselves by doing what others often refuse to do. That whole idea of be comfortable with getting uncomfortable because you're going to move forward. And we certainly see that in sport, and we see it in life. And then the last one for this week, see problems for what they can be, opportunities for growth. So no walls, hurdles, and in life, you're on that track, run your race, and if you come to a hurdle, go over it, under it, or around it. It's not a wall. See your problems as opportunities for growth. The Martelli Minute.
Terrific. As always, I'm sure our guest this week is going to quite enjoy that last one, because I can't even imagine the number of hurdles he had to go through to get this project done. But here it is. It's in the flesh.
We are delighted. And we've mapped this out for a good couple of months to make sure that it was this moment in time when we had Aaron Bracy. What is Aaron Bracy? First of all, he's a Philadelphian, through and through. And then you add in kind of like the birthright. He's a Philadelphia sports nut, a basketball nut, passionate about all of the teams and all of the opportunities that he has to cover this team. He's a friend to many which is a skill. We've talked about that. If you're out there and you're lucky enough to have 5 friends, you're blessed. Aaron Bracy is a friend to so many. So he has the skill of friendship. A great listener. When he talks to us about this book and how many people he listened to put together what's a masterclass in writing from everything that I've done. An author, and I know he's smiling ear to ear when he hears he's described as an author. Let's bring him on. Aaron Bracy.
Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. Another terrific introduction from Phil there. It's incredible to have you on. We have been so excited to be diving into A Soaring season, the definitive book on the 03-04 St. Joseph's Hawks. Really, such a pleasure to have you on, man.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm hoping that I can get through this without getting choked up. And Phil, you already kind of started me there with the introduction. Way too kind, but very much appreciated.
So, Aaron, we're going to save the book, and we're going to save that part of this for a later question. But how did Aaron Bracy become a preeminent sports writer in Philadelphia? How'd you get to today?
Well, growing up in high school, my daily routine was to eat my morning cereal and read Bill Lyon in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Bill Lyon was my guy. And I'm getting chills just saying it. Like, I wanted to be like Bill Lyon. I just loved the way he told stories. And I always felt like if I could ever do what Bill Lyon did, he would make me cry. He would get my emotions going, laugh, cry. If I could ever do that with a pen and have someone read something that I wrote and be able to move their emotions, like, for me, then I would have made it. And that was my goal. And so I went to St. Joseph's University. I wrote for the student newspaper. I wrote for the student radio station. Was on the student radio station, worked in sports information. I would like to throw in this little nugget here, Phil, because you were impactful in my journey. Your first game at the University of Delaware in 1995, I was there for the student radio station. Now, the student radio station at St. Joe's at the time, there's no streaming. It just broadcast when everything worked well into the cafeteria. So there might have been like 3 people listening to this broadcast. But I did the game. You won the game. The next day, I was Bill Lyon. That was my first game involved with the broadcast. And so the next day, I decided I'm going to be like Bill Lyon and go to your office and talk to you about the game. And so I went to your office, and Claire Ariano was there. And I said, "Hey, Aaron Bracy from the St. Joseph Student Radio Station. I'm here to talk to Phil about the game." And she said, "Do you have an appointment?" And I said, "No, do I need one?" And she said, "Hold on." So she goes back, she comes and she says, "Phil will be out in a few minutes." So you brought me into your tiny office there at the field house. I have no recollection of what was asked or what was said, but I do remember the feeling that I had, Phil, and that was, this is really what I want to do. You were the first person of, I guess, significance I ever interviewed. And I did do interviews in high school. I wrote for my student newspaper in high school. But after that interview, it was just more like, hey, this is what I want to do. And had you said no that day, I'm guessing I still would have pursued it because I really wanted to do it. But that really helped kind of propel me a little bit on the path. And so I continued onward. And my path and my journey kind of took some topsy-turvy directions. I never did end up getting where I hoped, which was to be the columnist at the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia Daily News. It just didn't work out. I did work for several newspapers, the Trenton Times, Courier Post, the Trentonian, but then I shifted into a career in education. But I still held on to this passion that I had about sports writing, and I worked for the Associated Press, covering the Phillies, the Flyers, the 76ers, and a little bit of the Eagles, and college basketball as well. I started a website. Bill, when you were coaching, as you know, you were always so generous with your time. But I burnt myself into the ground trying to do that. And but I wanted to continue with it. But I never really as much as I loved covering the games for the Associated Press, I never was really telling stories in the way that I really hoped that I would, like Bill Lyon. The Associated Press is very much writing a game summary, and it is a skill, but it's really not telling a story as much as a recap. So I could continue on with how the book got started, but that's kind of my journey to the book and to my writing, sort of my writing career. Would like to pause there because I could keep on talking.
Well, that's the next question, because if you looked at our script, as primitive as it is, the second question is right there. Please take us into the book origins, and I'll give some background. In the middle of the run in 0304, Dick Girardi had called me. He was covering us for the Daily News, and he said, if this plays out, I think this is going to be a big story. And I don't know if we were 10-0 or wherever we were. And I said, sure. I didn't realize that I was supposed to vet this through Don DeJulia and legal and all these other people. I was just, you want to do a story? Do a story. Do a book. And at the end of the year, when we fell short of a national championship and the Final Four, he floated it and no one kind of hooked. But then, so this is out there because we're going to get into why this story needed to be told, not from a basketball, but from a life perspective. So, Aaron, when, how, and why did you pick up and run with this to through the finish line right now?
All right, I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can, but I would like to tell this story. And I feel like it was a godsend. All these different things came together. And it starts a bit morbidly with both my dad and my stepfather passing away within 9 months of each other. Two men that meant a lot to me, obviously, and did a ton for me. It really got me thinking, Phil and Jared, like, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do before my time is up? And I really started thinking about that. And I always have wanted to write a book. And so that was kind of settling in my mind. Then something happened career-wise. I worked for McGraw-Hill. It's a publishing company. And they disbanded our social studies department, which is where I was working. So suddenly I was looking for another position. Luckily, the company also had openings in their English language arts. I love social studies and history. I got a job in English language arts where I'm still working today. And my first assignment, Phil and Jared, was to read books for the curriculum for middle school and high school. I would go to the library or Panera's, wherever it would be. And I was that was my job, to read books. And I've always been a big reader, but I was now reading fiction, whereas before I was reading nonfiction. So I started reading all these great fiction books. Like, these books were awesome. I couldn't put these books down. They were geared towards, high school and middle school students, but they were just awesome books. So I started thinking, like, hey, maybe I'll start writing again. And then the person in charge of my manager for that project, I found out that he wrote books. He was a published author. And I was like, you know what? Like, he's a nice man, but like, he's just a guy just like me, like, not some like superhuman person. I'm like, well, I think maybe I could do that. So then I started trying to think again, like, what idea could I write on? Okay. And then I was watching Penn Villanova one night in November. Mike Jensen was last game at the Inquirer, and he was retiring. And I thought, I'd like to start covering college basketball again in Philadelphia. And so I ran upstairs that night and I started big5hoops.com. Shortly after, I was like, wow, I'll write a feature story on the 2003-04 Hawks because it's the 20th anniversary for the website. I was like, wait a minute, maybe that's the book. And I started Googling. I'm like, somebody had to have written a book, Dick Girardi or somebody, like, and I started, no one had written a book. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start. So I started doing research very quietly. I didn't say anything to anyone. And then, Phil, I had a Spaces show on Twitter one night with Ken Krasalovic. We were talking about Hawk Talk. I hadn't said anything about the book or anything to anybody yet, not even, maybe just my wife. And your family, I think, alerted you that we were talking about Hawk Talk. You came into the Spaces and sort of unannounced started talking about 0304. And so I transcribed what you said afterward. And I was like, this is a godsend. All these things are coming together. The next day or two, I called Marie Wozniak, your former sports information director. And I spoke to Marie for a half an hour. And I got off the phone with Marie and I said, this is a book. I know it. It's a book. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to try and figure it out. And 15 months later, I had a completed manuscript. And whatever we are now, 18 months later, I have a book. So it's kind of a wild story. A lot of things came together. And like I said, I think a lot of it was a godsend, and it's really been a dream come true because this is something I've always wanted to do in my life.
So as you put this all together, you're wrestling with the cloud, so to speak, and you want to put a fence around a cloud. After all is said and done, What was the biggest challenge? What can our viewers take away to say, you know what, I can chase my dream, but I have to be ready for this biggest challenge? What was it?
The biggest challenge, Phil, was sacrifice. And for me, it came in the form of two things. Number one, I had to sacrifice time with my family, which was the hardest part about this project. Is I had to give up spending time with my 3 kids and my wife, because every moment that I had outside of my full-time job, I was immersed in the book. And so I had to sacrifice my time with my family, and I had to sacrifice leisure time. I had to sacrifice sleep. This book was more important to me than sleep. And my family is the most important thing in my life. But in order to do this book, I had to give up family time, and that hurt. It still does. But I hope that, and I've told my kids this, like, when you want something bad enough, there are going to be things that you have to give up in order to get there. And I hope that this can be an example for them, and the time lost, I hope the lessons gained will, if not outweigh it, will at least get on the scale.
Aaron, you speak about just the process of this book, and we spoke a bit off the air of just the setup in it as you go through it. And I think Phil probably has an idea of where you get at with the book, because he was obviously a central figure in it and in this journey with the book. But what I'm fascinated by is beyond they were a great basketball team, obviously, right? They went undefeated. Only a handful of teams ever can even say something like that. But there was a deeper underlying message with this team, with this program, that transcended just what they did on a basketball court. Without giving away, I would say, like, just what makes this book so special. I mean, can you kind of describe what made this a story, right? Because you talked, it feels like a novel, the way that it kind of builds itself, right?
Well, for me, a few things, and I think this is on the book cover. And for me, it's a story that you don't have to be the biggest to beat the biggest, and you don't have to have the best to be the best. And I really wanted to find out why that team was so special. There are certain teams in Philadelphia that really grab you, and this team was one of them. I obviously remembered the team as a graduate. I followed the team as a sports writer. I was following the team. I was not covering the team like others were, but there was something about this team that made it special. And I wanted to find out what it was. And the more and more that I dug into interviews and talked to people and research, this team really showed the possibilities that humans have when you put everything aside, but for one common goal, and you work together, and you can overcome anything in front of you if you work hard, believe in yourself, have teamwork, and have a common goal. I think that, and I hope readers will find that this story will inspire them in a way that is so much bigger than sports. I think this is a story for anyone. I think this is a story for business leaders. I think this is a story for anyone who wants to accomplish anything in their life, whether individually and especially having to work with others, and what it takes to get there. The sacrifice, the teamwork, overcoming adversity. And I think all of us want to be something in our life. And so many people tell us what we can't be. And this particular story is really interesting and really heartwarming, because so many people told these players and Phil and others that they weren't good enough. If you look at Phil, he wanted to be the coach at St. Joseph since he was in 8th grade. And he got almost to his dream job as an assistant coach for 10 years. When Jim Boyle resigned in the late 80s, Phil wasn't even under consideration to become the head coach. And yet he stuck it out and finally got the opportunity. Jameer Nelson was cast aside as a nobody, essentially. Not quite a nobody, but cast aside by the so-called power conferences because they looked at him and he didn't tip the scale for height. But he was so much bigger than anything that any measuring tape could see. And Phil and his staff, to their credit, saw that right away. Delonte West was one of 3 players on his high school team that played Division I, but the other 2 players were the ones that were being recruited. No one was recruiting Delonte. His biggest offers besides St. Joe's were Towson and Manhattan and Siena. And then the other guys were, John Bryant was not even recruited by a Division I school. Pat Carroll had one other Division I offer. And I could go on. Phil knows it as well as anyone. But the fact that these guys were sort of not quite cast-offs, but they weren't believed in a way that anyone really thought they could be much. And yet they rose to be the best team in the country. And I think the way they did it, and I think people will find out in the book how they did it, really, I think, at least for me, can inspire. It inspired me and still does. And I think it can inspire people. I think it inspired people 20 or plus years ago. And I think it can still today. And I think that's part of my hope with the book, that people read it and somehow it helps them in their own life.
The greatest compliment I can pay. It is not a basketball book. It's not a basketball book. It's a life book that has basketball as its backdrop. And there are messages in every chapter, and you'd think, and there are things that I didn't know. There are absolutely things that I didn't know. And probably there are some things that I wish I didn't know. Right? And right in the very beginning, the chapter on Jameer Nelson's recruiting, I had identified one person as the threat in and I mean that loosely, because it's not like we're changing the world, but we are. And when you read through that, you think, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And I'm glad I didn't know it, because I slept easier knowing that I was going against one program and not the other program that's listed. So I think you've done a fascinating job of the life story, with the basketball story being the backdrop. I find it extraordinary. In fact, I've started over because I want to take some notes along the way, because there are some stories. I anticipated that part of the stories were going to be the figment of Rob Hartshorn, like just that story. Does everybody understand this? The man was a cheerleader, and he got invited to try out for the team because I watched him dunk during cheerleading practice. And I thought, well, maybe you should play. And he is, and we'll get to that, but he's going to be one of the more verbose people involved in the book. I would anticipate that. You hit it a little bit. The biggest message that people should take, not about that team. What's the life message, Aaron, that permeates the book?
Well, and I just want to echo a little bit what you said about the way the book was written, Phil. I wanted this to be like kind of not anything close, not close, but I didn't want this to be like an AP story that I write. I wanted this to be a story it's a human interest story. And Phil, one of the best compliments that was paid to me was the copy editor the publisher hired to copy edit the book. After she copy edited it, she told me when she got the assignment, she dreaded it because she hates sports, her words. But when she read the book, she loved it. And when she told me that, and I was kind of going for that, because I didn't want this to be just a book for basketball junkies. Now, if you are a basketball junkie, I think you're going to love it. But if you're not a basketball junkie, I also think you're going to love it. And I think the reason is, to get to the answer to your question, Phil, is the life message. And I kind of touched on it, and I kind of wrap it up at the end of the story. And I don't want to give it away completely, but I do want to say this. This is a story about what you can do and what you can become and what kind of odds you can overcome, even in the face of adversity, people telling you you're not good enough, people telling you you don't have enough. Like sometimes you think like you have to come from this place or you have to have this. Like, I don't have, whatever it may be. I don't have the money to have the private trainers in sports or the private tutors or whatever it may be. Like, for me, if you read this story, like, Phil, your gym, like, it wasn't even as good as many high school gyms. Now, I know you didn't make a big deal about that. And I think part of that was because, and I said this in the book, that was really all that you knew as a coach, number one. And number two, if you projected that onto your players or recruits, that would be something that would be taken negatively. But let's be honest, you had a weight room where anyone could work out. So you might have a professor or even a member of the public working in with Jameer Nelson as he was trying to do his weight work. That didn't happen at Kentucky or Duke or UCLA. And yet you were able to be the best team in the country, better than Kentucky and Duke and UCLA. So for me, the message is it doesn't matter what you have or what you don't have. If you have a vision and you believe in something and you want to do something, yeah, it's going to take a lot of hard work. Delonte West slept in the locker room so he could get better. It's not just going to come to you. Like, you have to work at it and you have to work together with others, but you can do it. And for me, that's the message, Phil. And I think it's going to resonate with people just like it did 21 years ago. And I hope that, people can take that message. And I hope that this book, will help people in their own lives in whatever walk of life that is.
Yes.
Aaron, I have to put you on the spot here, though, just because the sheer number of people, I know you kept people updated in the process of the sheer number of people involved with this program that you spoke to through this whole process. I know the guy sitting next to me, his reputation precedes him with the way he has handled the media over the years. But I would love to know, who do you think your favorite to interview was? Who was the most fun to interview in this entire process?
It's funny. I get this question a lot. And I have to say this, Jared, every single person was a fun interview. And I mean that honestly, because the book would not be what it is without every single person. So I can't single anyone out as a favorite interview, but I can single out a few things about interviews. And first of all, I'd like to call out Phil, because I felt like this could be a book because of our relationship. And also because I figured he would give me the time that would be helpful to telling the story. And he exceeded my expectations. He invited me to his house. We talked for 3 hours straight without a break. I also called him subsequently several times to confirm some things, and always was willing and helpful. So I would like to call that out as a way of thanks, and just mostly as a way of thanks. But also, the story is what the story is, in large part because of Phil's time. But there are a few interesting stories, and one of the ones that I tell early on in the process, taking you to the third game of the season, Phil. St. Joseph's was playing at Old Dominion. They had beaten Gonzaga in a great game at Madison Square Garden, went to Boston University with a very not a great environment, played a good game, won at Boston University, went down to Old Dominion, and were in a dogfight to the end. Delonte West lost track of the clock. He thought the shot clock was the game clock, and he thought he had more time than he did. Time was running out, and he didn't know what to do. Jameer is screaming at him to pass him the ball. He passes the ball to Jameer at midcourt, and Jameer drains a 38-footer to give the Hawks the breathing room they needed to pull out the win, and saving the undefeated run practically before it started. So as I'm doing my research, there was a player in that game named Alex Lawton for Old Dominion. Alex Lawton had a phenomenal game that Phil might remember, but Old Dominion dominated the second half, dominated the glass. Alex Lawton, I think, had like 24 points and 14 rebounds, something like that. So I looked him up, and he has a foundation in Australia. And so I emailed him, and he said he'd be happy to talk to me. So we set up an interview. He's in Australia. I'm here. And he said, well, how about we do it at 6:00 my time? That's when I'm done work. And I said, okay. And so we figured it out. That was 3:30 in the morning, my time. So I had my interview ready. And so I got up at 3 in the morning, went downstairs. I called him at 3:30 in the morning. Already, this was like the fourth or fifth interview I did very early in the process. And so I call him, and I get no answer. And I'm just crushed. I'm like, oh, I got up so early. I'm so prepared for this interview, and we didn't connect. He calls me back 15 minutes later. He says, hey, mate, we got our time zones mixed up. I'm not off work yet. Not off work for another 45 minutes. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a call back in 15 minutes. So he calls me back in 15 minutes. So we talked from about 4 a.m. my time to about 4:45 a.m. And I don't know what it was about that interview, but it just was like, it just kind of propelled me forward, like kind of like Marie and kind of like Phil. But when I talked to him, I just, maybe just because I talked to someone from Australia and I figured I had to do a book, and he was really great for the interview, and his cooperation as well. So I don't want to single anyone out as a favorite or anything like that, but that's a really unique story. And I'm really grateful for Alex Lawton for doing the interview. And, but again, it was one of those things about sacrifice. Like he said, hey, we can do it this time. I said, I'm in. And it turned out to be a good interview. And I was glad we were able to have it.
That terrific player was a first-round draft pick in the NBA. I think he got drafted by the Atlanta Hawks somewhere around 20. And he annihilated us that night. We couldn't guard him. We couldn't guard him at all. And I can still see that. I kept looking because Delonte was going to make a play, but he had the clocks mixed up. And at the last minute, he threw it to Jameer. But because Jameer was Jameer, I was like, well, that'll go in. Of course that ball will go in. Not thinking like this is going to propel us to the number one ranking or anything like that. It's just a fascinating, it's a great story, and it shows how hard Aaron worked. So, Aaron, first of all, I want to make sure that we do this, and of course we're going to do it twice. We need to help you because you're helping others. How do we get this word out? What more can we do? You have been remarkable about getting the book to the people that helped you. Now we have to help. Everybody out there has to get this book, not just into a St. Joe fans' hands and alums. This is a life book that anybody involved in sport would want to have for their high school age young person, for themselves, for a business leader. How can we get the word out to people?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Phil. Beginning on Saturday, March 1st, March Madness, the book is available wherever books are sold. If it's not in your local bookstore now, it will be there soon. You can also order it online at Amazon, big5hoops.com/A Soaring Season, which is the book's homepage on my website, brooklinebooks.com. Brookline is the publisher right there in Havertown. That's where you can order it. And I would also ask, it's really helpful to share out the book on social media. You can tell your friends. If you don't have social media, you can tag me at Aaron_Bracy on X, Instagram, and Threads. Aaron Bracy on Blue Sky, Bracy Sports Media on Facebook. I've been overwhelmed and humbled, Phil, and Jared, by the response and the reviews that I've gotten so far. And honestly, I think it starts with the story. The story itself is, if the book has success, it's because of the story and the characters involved in the story. Any story needs triumph, and honestly, some heartbreak makes a good story. And this has both. Needs compelling characters. And in Phil Martelli, Delonte West, and Jameer Nelson, there are three truly compelling leading characters. And then any great story needs good supporting characters. And in Pat Carroll, Dwayne Lee, Dave Mallon, John Bryant, Dwayne Jones, Brian Jeselowski, Robert Hartshorn, Dwayne Lee, Andrew Kofer, Artur Surov, and all of the people that I interviewed, quite honestly. The book is going to be what it is because of the story, because of the compelling characters, the supporting characters, and because of all the people who contributed. And I just tried to sort of stay out of the way and tell the story and tell the stories that I heard. And hopefully that will resonate with people in the way that so far many people have felt like it resonates. And so I'm grateful, Phil, for allowing me to share the information. I'm grateful for the kind words that you've had about me and about the book. It's very humbling, and I'm very appreciative.
So it's out there. It's in print. It's going to, people have to make this thing happen, not just throughout the Delaware Valley, throughout this basketball world, throughout the life lessons world out there. We need everybody. As you look back, Aaron, give us one nugget that didn't make the book. Give us one story, because I have one. Now I would like you. There's one story that didn't make the book.
I'm trying to decide if I want to say it or not, Phil, because there are a few things that I left out of the book that I felt like they were good stories, but they weren't. I don't think it would exactly tell the story the way that I wanted. Let's put it that way. But I will say this. There was one story about John Bryant on the training room table. And this is a really cool story because you had just gotten to be number one in the country. And several people were telling me, like, hey, you have to ask Phil, you have to ask John Bryant about this story about the training room table and them being the number one team in the country. And John Bryant was laying on the training room table, and he's lying there, and you come in and he says, Coach, I can't believe I'm a starter on the number one team in the country. And then your response was, I can't believe that either, or something like that. And I put that in there. And then when I read it back, I felt like it didn't come across the way that, like, we just laughed. I didn't think it came across the way. So I took that latter part out. And in the book, it just says, Coach, I can't believe I'm on the number one team in the country. And your response there is not in the book. While humorous, the way that chapter was flowing, I thought it needed to be just maybe a little bit more of a serious moment there. So I left that response out, albeit funny, and sharing it now. But I'll say this, Phil, like, I honestly, like, of all the stories I heard, like, most of what I heard is in the book. Like, I tried to include, I interviewed 90 more, did more than 100 interviews with 90 people. And I wanted to make sure they were all represented in some way. And so their voices and their stories are all in there in some way, in some form.
And one of the things that happened in that story was when others were joking with John, previous to that, he was with Billy Luke, the athletic trainer, who was taping him for practice. And John said something like, you know what? I consider myself to be the best screener in the country. He said, when I'm screening for those guys, I'm the best screener on the number one team in the country. And that's really what they were all about. And the one that I shared with Aaron after the fact was, there was a lot of hype about the Gonzaga game in Madison Square Garden and how St. Joseph's traveled and we won. That was on a Friday night. On Monday of the following week, we had a closed scrimmage, which probably had 600 or 700 people there. You were supposed to close it, but I didn't close practice, so I didn't want to close a scrimmage. And we scrimmaged, I don't know what their school was called then, but it's today Jefferson. It was Philly U. It was Textile, with the legendary Hall of Fame coach Herb McGee. They absolutely annihilated us in a closed door scrimmage. And I can remember some of our fans saying, oh, they're full of themselves because they beat Gonzaga, which was a nationally ranked team, and they just got waxed. Now, we ended up winning by a point or two, but who keeps scoring a scrimmage? We got waxed by Philly U in that scrimmage. So it was a good lesson learned, and it didn't come to me until after in speaking to Aaron. So now we have to put you on the spot. 2 closing questions. You've studied that team intimately now. Who/what, staying with the theme of our podcast, who or what made the difference? Why was that team on the Mount Rushmore of Philadelphia basketball teams?
Well, in the theme of that team, Phil, I could not single any person out. Every person in some way made a difference. I'll just give you a couple nuggets that are in the book. Obviously, you probably know these. Well, you do know these stories, Phil. I'm going to go to the players, single out a few of them, and just give you a little nugget from the book. I don't want to give everything away. But Jameer made a difference with his leadership. And the thing that really struck me, and Monte Ross told me this story, you had a really poor practice one day, and Jameer called everyone together after practice and said, yo, we're all competing for spots here. Ain't nobody have their spots secure. We're all out here competing for spots. When your best player is practicing as if he were trying out for the team, that's leadership. That's an example from Jameer. I'm going to go to some of your walk-on players because that's what jumps out at me. You mentioned Robert Hartshorn earlier. Robert Hartshorn, no one really knew and might not know his name today, but he was very important to your success. And no one might not realize that. But what he did, Phil, as you know, was he helped to raise the intensity in the practice. He was like the hype man before the hype man was a big thing. And there's some hilarious, my wife was in tears reading some of these parts of the book with Robert Hartshorn in practice. I would like to send readers or send listeners to the book to learn the stories, but I would like to just say Robert Hartshorn was really integral to the success of the team in the way that he helped to elevate the level of practice. And then a story about Chet Stakaitis, who, like the rest of your players, Phil, was always looking to find the open man. The way your team moved the ball is just, I'm getting chills thinking about it. When I watch those highlights, and you know, Phil, I covered so many games now live, and I love the game. I love watching the game. I love being there at the games, but I don't love the way the game is played today as much. It's a lot of just, chuck and duck. Let's get up as many threes as we can. Let's try and get dunks and threes. Ball movement and offensive fluidity is somewhat of an afterthought today. When you watch that team, and I would highly encourage anyone to go to YouTube, Google 2003-04 St. Joseph's Hawks, and watch 2 possessions, and you'll see the way they moved the ball because they didn't care who took the shot. It was about who had the best shot. But sometimes you did need to be selfish. And there's a really cool story, and this also speaks to Jameer's leadership from the Drexel game when Jameer told Chet Stakaitis that, hey, we need you not to be unselfish. We need you to shoot. And Chet Stakaitis hit 4 3-pointers in a matter of a couple minutes to turn a close game against a tough Drexel Bruiser Flint coach team into a comfortable margin. But just the unselfishness of players like Chet Stakaitis, John Bryant, Dwayne Jones, Dwayne Lee. He wanted to play, Phil. He wasn't getting playing time, but he was playing behind Jameer Nelson. So Dwayne Lee said, and this is in the book, I'm going to be the best practice player I can. I'm going to make Jameer better every day in practice. And then when I do get my opportunity to get in the game, I'm going to take the lead from 8 to 10 points or 10 to 12. There's going to be no let off. It was just, and I could go on and we could probably be here for a while, but every single player contributed in a way that made the team great. And people are going to learn more about each of the players in the book. I know I didn't touch on every one of them, and I could continue, but I know you guys, I know Phil, from hearing your schedule, you're a very busy guy. So I'll pause there.
So Aaron, we always end these, and again, Jared will say this afterwards, that this has exceeded anything that we ever anticipated. But now I want to take that mirror and put it on you. Who's made a difference in your life, Aaron? Share that with our people so that they can go out and make a difference in each other's lives.
Well, there's no human being has made more of a difference, human beings, than in my life than my mom, Susan Parada, and my wife, Jeannie. They're my rocks, always there for me every day. But I've heard your podcast before, so I did prepare this answer. I wanted to single out all of my teachers, And particularly, I want to single out my high school principal or my elementary school principal. And Phil, I shared this story at the book launch. My elementary school principal had a sign when we walked into the door, and the sign said, "I am somebody." And I walked into that school every day from kindergarten through sixth grade, seeing that sign every day that I am so I'm getting emotional thinking about that I am somebody. And when somebody tells you that you are something, that you're special, that you are somebody, you start to believe it. So I am so grateful and thankful for all the teachers who've made a difference in my life, who've told me that I can do it, that I am somebody, that I am special. And I would encourage everyone that has the opportunity, particularly to speak to kids and to talk to kids, to tell them that they are special. And I think kids today have a lot against them, particularly with social media, a lot of online bullying, sadly. Kids need to hear it. And I think that for me, that made a difference in my life. I always felt like I was special. And despite the millions and billions of people in the world, I always felt that I was unique and had talents. And so I would love to pay that forward. And I hope in some ways this book does pay that forward. And I would certainly, I try and do it in my own life with my own kids and kids that I encounter by telling them that they're special. And I would highly encourage people to do that for kids because it could make a huge difference and probably more than you know.
Well, again, thank you for what you've done for us today and for all the people that will get to see and hear these pearls of wisdom.
Aaron, I just think about we probably don't have this book if a young Aaron Bracy doesn't walk in to see that sign in school every day. I appreciate you sharing that wonderful, wonderful story. And I, just one more time for you. I mean, A Soaring Season available now wherever books are sold. It is well worth the purchase. Please go out there and support our friend Aaron Bracy because he wrote a terrific, terrific story about life with a little bit of hoops mixed in.
Well,
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you guys very much. And Phil, thanks again for your friendship and for all the time you've given me over the years. It's made a difference in my life. So thank you.
Thank you.
I know. Yeah. Another rock star. Well, I mean, listen, going through the book now, you could just, I mean, it's really impressive. We gave Aaron endless praise, but I mean, it doesn't feel like someone's author debut. I'll tell you that much.
Yes.
I mean, the way it's crafted, he put a ton of work, a ton of thought in this on top of a full-time job, on top of a family. It's genuinely impressive what he was able to accomplish. Folks, I implore you to get out there and get your hands on a copy of A Soaring Season. If you are a Philadelphian, if you are a Hoops fan, if you're a Philadelphia Hoops fan, it's a must get for the bookshelf for sure.
And not only for the bookshelf, because it's March and there's a lot of basketball, but I'm counting the number of books that I see on the South Jersey beaches when I come wandering down there, May, June, July, and August. This has to be on every blanket from Atlantic City to Cape May.
There we go.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be done it by then, but I might bring it down for a reread to Long Beach Island this summer. We'll see.
You're going to need one. Well, it's time.
Let's find out where in the world is Phil Martelli.
I had the pleasure last week to go to a Villanova practice and spend time with Mike Sheridan and Whitey Rigsby and Kyle Neptune. Walked away impressed with the energy and the noise in their practice. It was a prelude to doing the Villanova Seton Hall game and the phenomenal show by Eric Dixon. Villanova was down double digits going into the second half. And Eric Dixon outscored Seton Hall to lead Villanova to a much-needed win. And with another basketball just nut is the only other way I could describe it. John Fonta, unbelievable his energy and his knowledge. Seton Hall grad, and when he lined up all of his doings for the week, ending up with a Paige Beckers game at UConn, I just shake my head and think, I wish I had a little bit of that energy.
It's a very fun combo.
Yes.
The two of you on the broadcast together, I have to say.
Then I went to Drexel Monmouth with Rob Brooks and did that broadcast. Drexel, impressive win coming off the fact that they lost at Monmouth in double overtime, 104-97. They held them to 61 points. We wish them well in the CAA tournament as it comes up. Then I had an exhausting night. Before the Drexel game, I had an exhausting night. On Thursday night, Bryant UMass Lowell at UMass Lowell decided after the clock runs out with 2 foul shots by Bryant to win by a point. Then I flip on Drexel Hampton. Drexel down 5, minute 30 left. They win, not before Hampton has a 3 in the air to tie it at the buzzer. And then I'm upstairs in the office doing some things, getting organized. And I get word that Michigan has given up 57 points in the first half to Rutgers at home. This is coming off Michigan winning at Nebraska 46-43. So when I heard 57, I had to come down and watch that. I watched that, and Namari Barnett, a beautiful young guy who was with us when I was out there, stayed, and he makes about a 37-footer for Michigan to win by a point. I was exhausted. And then I'm thinking, that's the fan part of it. That wasn't even like the coaching part of it. And then a lot of work in preparation for NIT selections, an awful lot of work. But that's where I was. That doesn't even start to begin to talk about where I'm going.
Busy guy, man. I mean, March is here, though. The number of buzzer beaters and big shots we saw over the past week, you named a few. I mean, Zion Stanford at Temple, the Michigan State shot. I mean, it's here. It's March.
There's no doubt about that. But this week, I was really looking forward to today because a lot of prep for Aaron Bracy, and so proud of the work that he's done with this book. I'm going to be on a national podcast. I don't know what the difference is between that podcast and ours, but Less on Sports with a childhood friend of mine, Steve Stefano. We're going to be on Less on Sports sometime in the middle of this week. An officials dinner, a basketball officials dinner. I've been invited to attend that in Montgomery County. And then Friday I leave for Xavier practice in Cincinnati in preparation for doing Providence Xavier on Saturday afternoon. All while rooting Bryant home, we hope in their last regular season game to give them the America East regular season title. I'm anxious to get back on Sunday because Pastor Clarence Jones, a dear friend of mine, runs MBS Community Outreach Ministries. Sunday morning, he's running mental health and a faith talk for high school age students, and he's asked me to be on the panel. So that will lead me into coming home Sunday and preparing, because we can't miss next week. Next week, we have a guy who created his own industry, not his own business. This man created his own industry, the original and really the only bracketologist, because I'm sure he trademarked that name.
I hope
next
so.
week, going into championship week, we're going to be joined by Joe Lenardi.
That is right. We are going to get our brackets set before even Selection Sunday. We're going to have ESPN and St. Joe's fame, Joe Lenardi, on, the bracketologist, the famed bracketologist. And man, that is going to be a blast. That is going to be a lot of fun, just in time for the lead up to Selection Sunday. It's going to be just about perfect.
And one of the things we want people out there, I'm really proud to announce this, but John Griffin, the passionate John Griffin, passionate for college basketball, for Philadelphia, for all things basketball in Philadelphia, he approached me last year and asked if he, with a collection of alumni coaches in Philadelphia, we could take over the breakfast, take some of the burden off of the current coaches. So March 17th, on the floor of the Palestra, we will have an esteemed panel presenting For Coaches versus Cancer, the tournament tip-off breakfast. Just the lineup. We're hoping that the current coaches can attend. There's no obligation. We're hoping that they can be there. We have asked each school to send us a Hall of Famer, and we're going to incorporate them into the program. We reached out to Dick Hoops Weiss, John Feinstein, author, hoop aficionado, Dana O'Neill, Dick Girardi, Mike Jensen, Don DeJulia, Dave Pauly, on and on and on. And we're going to get up there and we're going to talk hoops. And the great Speedy Morris and Keith Morris have agreed to present the Speedy Morris School Initiative Award to a young fellow from Delaware County, Kyle Meekum. I'm just so excited about John's vision coming to fruition. So thank you to John. Thank you to all the people. Sponsors are still needed. People at the tables are still needed. And we are excited because we're also going to be crushing cancer that day.
1,000% tickets still available March 17th. That tourney tip-off breakfast. If you head to the Coaches vs. Cancer Philadelphia website, you'll be able to purchase tickets. You can also get involved as a sponsor. That will be a fun morning. A good breakfast, great hoops talk, and a great cause.
Can't beat it.
That just about wraps us up here for this iteration of Make a Difference. But man, next week, Joe Lenardi, you got to be locked in for that one before you get that bracket filled out. And for us, if you are looking to partner with Phil in any way, shape, or form, pnjmakeadifference.com. That's where you can tell Phil your story and kind of describe to him how he can possibly help you make a difference, whether it's in the classroom, on the court, off the court, in the workplace, wherever it may be. You can go ahead and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Make a Difference Pod. We are on X at Make a Diff Pod. Make a Difference with Phil Martelli on Facebook. If you are watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. We would appreciate that as always. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please give us a 5-star rating. And if you're looking for that Martelli Minute, Phil_Martelli on Instagram every morning, sometime between 6:30 and 7:30.
Getting a little later each day.
Yeah, well,
because I'm staying up reading the book.
I bet. Yeah.
Give me that book one more time.
You're burning the midnight oil every week every night with this book here. A Soaring Season. Thanks to our good friend Aaron Bracy joining us today. It is available now wherever books are sold. You got to get your hands on one. But that is just about it for us here for Make a Difference. See you, folks.